Inspire Community Podcast. Shahirah here, co-founder of Finch and venture partner at Scarlett Ventures, and your host today. Joining me in today's episode is the lovely Ashi Bhat, Web3 marketer and founder of Insider App, which is a blockchain loyalty solution for consumer brands. Welcome, Ashi. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. Ashi, you recently spoke at NFT Fest on the topic of Web3 marketing for brands, and I was really pleased to see a lot of household names entering the foray, which is very top of mind for them. And I think for us to be able to see brands that we're familiar with, making these dedicated efforts is really the gateway to sort of mainstream awareness and understanding. Do you find that it's an easier conversation for you to have because you can reference brands that people are familiar with?
Yeah, definitely. So it's great to see some of the biggest brands in the world entering this space. And I think that'll be sort of key for bringing in sort of the mainstream audience and a big unlock for them when they start to see some of the benefits of this technology and what it enables. So we've seen brands like Starbucks and Nike made headlines in the space, just generating so much awareness, but also generating revenue and interest in Web3 technology. And we've also seen more enterprise-focused brands like Salesforce, as well as Amazon, recently make headlines looking to bring in some of their clients into Web3 and onboard them onto different chains and I guess help them navigate this space. So that'll be a great way for enabling greater adoption, but also hopefully enabling better security and regulation around this space.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll stop you there because we'll obviously dive into all the details of the different projects and things that you've seen, and we can kind of point to as good examples of what brands are doing. But I'd love to start with a bit about your personal background and your journey into Web3. I understand you come from a marketing consulting background, so really curious to see or hear how you've made that sort of transition into Web3.
Yeah, sure. So I guess over the last couple of years, I was advising ASX 200 brands on their customer experiences and their employee experiences and thinking about how technology could enable that. And I think in sort of late 2021, I had a marketing agency that I was doing that for, but I was also consulting for big brands like KPMG and Deloitte. And in like 2021, I had clients start to ask me about Web3, what it meant, what was the opportunity, what were some of the challenges, especially given companies like Facebook changed their name to Meta, and there was so much news around that. So I decided to jump deep into the crypto rabbit hole. I joined my first bunch of communities, started building my global relationships to learn about this space. And I thought, what better way to upskill than put my own sort of marketing skills to use? So I started advising Web3 native brands on their community building and their marketing strategies, and thinking about how they might go to market and build their communities. And so at that point in time, the unlock for me was realizing that NFTs as a technology really gives ownership for a customer and gives them the ability to co-create the products and services that they're consuming, shifting them from sort of passive recipients of a product and service to active co-creators and co-owners in that. And so that becomes a really powerful tool for a brand to reinvigorate that customer experience and engage them in new ways. And so that was really interesting to me. And given some of the challenges that brands sort of face with customer acquisition and the high costs there, but also with loyalty and stagnating loyalty and engagement, Web3 tooling like NFTs, but also crypto wallets offer sort of a superpower to engage customers better, lower customer acquisition costs, but also collect more richer data on their customers to drive more personalized experiences for them.
That's a great answer. And I'd like to break that down a little bit more. So when you're talking to companies that are at the very beginning of their journey, understand they need to be in this space for all the reasons you've just listed, how do you go about explaining to them what the opportunity is, and maybe a bit of a a playbook or a best practice, if one exists, in helping brands sort of start thinking about what that strategy could look like for them?
Yeah, sure. So when we think about Web3, it's essentially just the third iteration of the internet. And I like to talk about it as somewhere where ownership and control is decentralized. And if we think about how the internet has evolved over the last 40 years, but also how marketing's evolved, that's really sort of a good way to play out that context. So sort of in Web1, read-only web, there was corporations like Yahoo and AOL that controlled the flow of internet, and brands had clickable banners and email marketing that navigated to individual sites. And then Web2 came along, where there was this new era of user-generated content with websites like YouTube and Facebook and Wikipedia really giving anyone the voice to share their ideas. But because these platforms were centralized, they owned all the data and they generated revenue, and they kept that for themselves. And in Web2, brands had to really focus on being data oriented. They had to build up their sales and marketing teams to generate leads and then move those leads through the funnel. And then if we think about Web3, NFTs is a technology give anyone the ability to own a piece of the internet, and they can represent things like art or code or music or governance rights, credentials, loyalty passes, whatever it may be. But with that technology, it really shifts the relationship between a brand and a customer, moving them from sort of passive recipients into active co-owners of that brand. As they bring in more other members into that brand ecosystem, it drives up the value of that NFT token and enables benefits for both that brand and their community. And so it really, shifts that relationship. And so when brands think about how they might create new products or make any decisions, they have the option to go to that community and ask for their input. So it really changes that dynamic and that power relationship between a brand and a consumer. And so if we think about the opportunity, it's really good to think about some brands that have done it really well. So for example, Nike made headlines last year. They launched their Crypto Kicks collection by acquiring a brand called Artifact, and it generated upwards of 180 million in NFT sales, and they attracted 200,000 new members into their sort of brand community. And they're also now releasing their Swoosh platform, which is a platform for co-creation, which enables their community members to create virtual assets like merchandise and shoes around the Nike brand and potentially earn royalties off that. So what Nike essentially is doing here is not only tapping into this community to create sort of user-generated content at scale, but also starting to test out and experiment with new products, understand emerging trends in real time that'll hopefully help them shape up future product development and get a sort of competitive advantage amongst their competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to, sorry, I'm just
yeah, no, that's okay. I'll just pause you there, because I am personally a very big fan of the Artifact community and have their NFTs, and one of the things that is a real standout and what I see as the opportunity in Web3 is for these companies to create and mobilize and empower their communities as creators and be led by what these communities want to build and share. And I think that's a very new layer of customer engagement that maybe exists in a Web2 sort of version, but certainly not the depth and the level of commitment and sort of belonging that and loyalty, I think, that these community members have to the brand and to the people within it. And it's been quite fascinating to see this cultural behavior take shape in Web3 in a way that Web2 doesn't quite achieve. So it seems like for a brand like Artifact and Nike, going down that creator sort of path is very much in line with how they can continue building that loyalty and engagement and retention over the long term, which is ultimately what these brands exist to do.
Yeah, definitely. So Web3 really offers that, ability to create these hyper-engaged communities and have this one-to-one messaging relationship with the end consumer. And research tells us that the average consumer is in a part of about 14 loyalty programs, but only active in 6 of those. So brands are looking for new ways to engage them, but take their attention and provide them more valuable offerings. And so this is one way to do that effectively.
Just on the topic of loyalty, you are building Insider app, which is a blockchain loyalty platform. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so Insider is a blockchain-powered loyalty solution for consumer brands to put their loyalty programs on the blockchain, offer NFT loyalty passes and rewards, and use those to build hyper-engaged community, offer tokenized experiences, as well as collect more valuable data on their customers to drive more personalized experiences. And so any brand can fill out a simple questionnaire, launch an NFT loyalty pass, and their customers can purchase that using a credit card. And the brand can tap into benefits like generating new revenue, creating these token gated communities, and leveraging crypto wallet data to build a more comprehensive view of customer behavior. And their customers, since they own these loyalty passes and the rewards associated with those, they can trade any rewards that they don't redeem. And every time they trade that reward to someone new in the sort of ecosystem, they have the option to bring in an additional customer at sort of little to no marketing cost for the business. So that's a big challenge that brands deal with around sort of customer acquisition costs and that rising, as well as the ability to collect meaningful data given privacy updates from brands like Google and Apple that have eliminated third-party cookies. And so we believe that blockchain-enabled loyalty can unlock some of those benefits for brands.
Yeah, brilliant. Just I guess a thought and a question. We've discussed sort of the more common Web3 strategy around NFTs to kind of enhance customer engagement. Can you talk us through some other examples and maybe from kind of a B2B perspective of what these Web3 strategies look like for brands that have a different customer segment?
Yeah, sure. So I believe that brands that are entering this space right now need to be looking at it through the dual focus of sort of education and exploration. And they really need to be thinking about what their purpose is, where their customers are, what they value, how they can provide value before extracting it, and really create a fun experience for them. And so we've seen a bunch of brands create metaverse experiences, for example, and they really need to think about, like, why would my customer enter this metaverse space where they have to onboard to this new platform if it's not fun for them, and how do we make them return? Like, so recently I saw Hugo Boss do this really well at Metaverse Fashion Week, and they created this super immersive showroom. And I'm not even a Hugo Boss customer, but I spent sort of 15 minutes walking around, exploring it, and you can view sort of these virtual sort of designer clothing, and you can click through to purchase it on the website, which I thought was really seamless. But yeah, so they need to think critically about that customer and what they want. And we've also seen brands that are entering Web3 sort of do it in one of two ways: either a standalone launch like Starbucks did with their Odyssey program, which was their Web3 loyalty program, or they've acquired a well-established Web3 brand and done it as Nike has done with the acquisition of Artifact. And so there are pros and cons to both of those approaches around sort of risk and sort of giving up a bit of ownership and how you want to sort of execute that way. So brands really need to think about that critically, as well as the fact that brands should be thinking about dipping a toe in, maybe going in with sort of a marketing campaign, or maybe just tokenizing a portion of their loyalty program, setting sort of clear metrics for that before they kind of sort of fully immerse themselves, just given the steep learning curve involved and the stage that we're at with the whole UX and some of the challenges for their sort of mainstream audiences as well.
I imagine one of the challenges, and this kind of comes up across sort of the Web3 discussions in general, is that a lot of the language that's currently used is quite technical, but you know, when it hits mainstream, it won't be, and we simply will not really have to know the kind of technology that facilitates it. It's just that it exists and that it's presenting, faster, more efficient, improved solutions. Are you finding that that's also the case with the projects that you're working with, particularly brands that are consumer facing and do need to communicate their sort of Web3 proposition in a way that is easily understandable?
Yeah, definitely. I think with the recent events in this space with FTX and Luna and all these things that have happened, there's a lot of fear surrounding this space, and brands are trying to question, like, why would they enter? Why now? Why not 5 years from now when there's a tried and tested model? So it's really about sort of stripping away that jargon and kind of highlighting the benefits. And even for their consumer experiences, really taking away some of that terminology. And we've seen brands like Reddit do that really, really well when they launched their collectible avatar collection last year, which was essentially their NFT collection, but they had no sort of Web3 terminology. They reworded their wallets to vaults and created a concept that surrounded sort of gamification and brought in many Web2 consumers into their sort of brand community, which I thought was a very powerful example of a Web2 brand that launched a Web3 initiative and did it without mentioning the word NFTs once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so fascinating. And that will be the reality, I think, for most
Yeah,
brands
definitely.
when it does become a little bit more commonplace. So you're working with a number of household brands that are really achieving positive momentum in the Web3 space. What do you think it will take for it to go mainstream and for regular people, who maybe not even aware of what blockchain or Web3 technology is, for them to be really adopting it in the way that we hope?
Yeah, so I think there's a big user experience problem at the moment with these technologies and the experiences around them being incredibly clunky, people getting rugged. There's so many scams in the space, and there's a big issue around that. But I think some brands that are moving into the space that will hopefully generate greater mainstream awareness around this, like I mentioned before, were Salesforce and Amazon. So Salesforce, for example, recently announced their suite of Web3 products for their enterprise clients to really integrate NFTs within their business models. And given Salesforce has around 150,000 clients globally, and some of them are big brand names, they're going to be onboarding a lot of them to Polygon and are essentially greenlighting NFTs, which will hopefully encourage greater security, greater regulation, better user experiences around this space. And then Amazon later this month are launching an NFT marketplace that will sort of pair NFTs with physical assets and sort of trial out the pilot with their US Prime customers. So that'll be another great example. And they're offering this very Web2-esque user experience where they'll let their customers purchase with credit cards as opposed to cryptocurrency. So I'd be really interested to see sort of how that lands and how customers respond to that kind of experience.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the biggest barriers to entry at the moment, because it is clunky, and for the most part, a lot of it is developed by really great developers who perhaps don't have that sort of user experience, expertise. And I think it's telling. And so be really keen to see how some of these bigger tech companies come in and add that experience layer to make it more accessible and more fun to use, to be honest. Even I'm sort of always a little bit confronted with how difficult it is to navigate, and then of course the security concerns on top of that doesn't make that a confident experience, particularly for new people coming in. I'd like to ask you about a recent post on your blog. So for those listening, Ashi's got a blog called Native Marketer, which provides tools and insights for Web3 marketing and growth. So do check it out. Your recent post was on this idea of direct to avatar brand experience. And I'd love for you to tell us what that is, and how far are we from brands providing that virtual first kind of economy?
Yeah, sure. So we've seen a number of brands enter sort of centralized worlds like Roblox and Fortnite and offer these virtual first experiences for their consumers, as well as virtual only sort of goods and services. Given there's about 3 billion gamers globally, and younger consumers like Gen Z and Alpha are spending increasing amounts of time in platforms like Roblox, where greater than 67% of consumers are under the age of 17, brands really need to accommodate that and meet these consumers where they are. And these consumers understand virtual only assets natively, like we sort of understand social experiences. And so there's a number of considerations that brands need to take when designing virtual only assets. It plays a big role in their sort of identity and expression, and they need to cater for that. And so we've seen brands like Forever New launch digital beanies last year, which mirrored their sort of physical products, and they were able to sell about 1 million units, and it only cost them $500 to do that. So we're seeing impressive margins on some of that stuff, and we've seen other brands like Gucci launch sort of virtual luxury goods to their consumers in Roblox, which sold at like $2,000 on the secondary market, but only cost $5 in the game, and that was more than the physical version of that product. So really interesting sort of dynamics there. And in terms of how far we are for sort of mainstream adoption and where we're sort of in the process, I heard this really interesting analogy the other day around this, which was where Web3 is at currently is like Harry Potter in the first book, where he's just discovered that he's a wizard and that he's got all these powers, but he doesn't really know what to do with it. So there's a lot of refinement and testing and all these launches and better user experiences that need to happen before he's fully equipped to like save the world and defeat Voldemort in that final book. So I thought that was a really interesting analogy for this space, because we are quite early, and although brands are starting to do these experiments, there's a big learning curve involved to getting sort of mainstream users into the space.
Yeah, wonderful. A couple more quick questions. I guess one of the questions we do like asking on the show is around community, and I think that's very relevant to both what you're building at Insider App, but also for all of these brands that you're working with that need to build a community and need to kind of do that in the right way. What does community mean to you, and what advice do you have on those building out communities for their brands?
Sure. I guess in the context of Web3, community is really a group of people that might have a shared interest or shared ownership in something, and they're able to sort of co-create that, as well as see the upside of that going well. And I guess when I'm advising Web3 native brands around community building, it's really about thinking about the core sort of fundamentals of that. So what is the purpose of your community? What are the key roles involved? What are you trying to achieve? But then also, like, how are you onboarding, nurturing, incentivizing, and engaging the users of that community to ensure it's thriving and self-sufficient? And how are you managing that? How do decisions get made? So there's a number of things for community designers to think about in this space, and any sort of brands that are coming into this space really need to think about their go-to-market strategy as their go-to-community strategy, because they can really mobilize these audiences around high-value adding activities for the brand.
Yeah, and for Insider App, what does community mean to you there?
That's a really good question. So our tool won't provide sort of the community element, but it will provide the technology to be able to token gate experiences and create sort of meaningful spaces for their sort of consumers to connect. And so it'll be really interesting to see what brands do with that, when you think about loyalty and customers really owning those loyalty passes and the sort of engagement and the gamification that unlocks. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Well, it sounds like these all these brands have such an enormous opportunity ahead of them. I think anytime that they can explore, and experiment with new ways to build that loyalty and engagement, empower their communities, particularly if there is a creator element. But I really liked what you mentioned earlier about having this kind of one-on-one relationship and one-on-one dialogue with end customers through a Web3 strategy is really important. But I think we're also just forgetting that it's cool, it's new, it's exciting, it's different. It's kind of the intersection of so many different disciplines that we're seeing emerge. And as a consumer, I think we're hungry for these new experiences and new ways to kind of engage with our brands in a way that is more personalized to us. And that kind of goes back into like the data play and the ability for these brands to really have their sort of finger on the pulse as to what their customers and what their communities are wanting, and being led by that, as with all good projects do. So thank you so much for such great insights today. Really appreciate your time, and tell us when we can expect to see Insider App. Are you close to launching, and what's the timeline on that?
Yeah, sure. So we're currently building out our solution with a few smaller brands, using that as sort of pilots to really collect data, metrics, and sort of scale from there. And so definitely sort of off a few months, but very sort of excited to share back what we're learning. And we've learned so much about the Australian and global consumer landscape and what customers are wanting from their loyalty programs today. So yeah, it's really exciting to see it take shape.
Great. Well, we'll have to get you back on the show so we can just do a full episode dedicated on Insider App, and you can talk us through what that looks like.
Yeah, definitely. That would be awesome.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for your time today, Ashi. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for listening at home. Ashi, what's the best way to get in touch with you other than your blog?
Anyone can reach me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Feel free to send me a message to chat. I love meeting new sort of builders and enthusiasts in this space. But if you want sort of more marketing related content, you can also pop my blog, Native Marketer, on Substack. We can pop the links in the comments if that's helpful. But yeah, no, thanks so much for having me today. It's been a fun chat.
You're very welcome. Thanks for your time, Ashi, and thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you next episode. Bye for now.